In this video, I'm going to teach you what your tax obligations are as a dropshipper, how to collect the right amount of sales tax, and also how to file your sales tax returns. Surprisingly, it is one of the questions that we get asked the most here at Wholesale TED, which I guess isn't that surprising given how little information there is available out there on the internet for it. And while this topic may not be the most exciting, I should know I'm pretty tired today and I'm having to make this video about this topic, and it's been quite challenging. The reality is that it's very important for you as an online seller to get it right. Now, when you listen to this video, at the start it's going to sound like it's quite hard and challenging to collect the right amount of sales tax and to pay it. But keep listening, because I'm going to share with you an incredible tool that is going to make the process super simple, even if you are a newbie. And it doesn't matter if you are dropshipping on Amazon.com or with AliExpress in a WooCommerce store or in a Shopify store, because I'm going to explain all three of these. So let's jump straight into the video. Now I want to preface this video with the fact that I am not a qualified accountant, and you should never use the advice that I'm giving you here in place of a qualified accountant's. Every business owner should have an accountant. It doesn't matter what business you are running, you really should have one. I also want to preface this video with the fact that this is only talking about collecting sales tax in the USA, because dropshipping within the USA is something that we teach here at Wholesale TED. But if you are outside of the USA, yet dropshipping within the USA, this video is very relevant for you, so keep listening. Now I'm going to break this video down into the common questions that I get asked. So let's move on to the first question. Question number 1, what taxes do I need to pay? The answer to this is that you need to pay income tax, and you also need to pay sales tax where applicable due to something that's called Nexus. And I will explain what Nexus is shortly. Your income tax obligations are pretty basic, so I won't go into that in this video. The real tricky question is sales tax. For those of you that don't know, sales tax is when a governing body places a tax on goods and services. It is up to the seller of the good or the service to collect the sales tax and to pay it to the governing body. In the United States, sales tax is collected by individual states and not the federal government. In addition, states often don't just have a flat sales tax rate that you need to pay. Individual cities and districts will have their own taxes on top of the sales tax of the state as well. Usually you pay the state tax plus a local district tax plus a special tax, which is sometimes included depending on the city. For example, let's take the state of New York. In New York City, which is of course based in the state of New York, you would have to pay an 8.875% sales tax rate. This includes a 4% state tax, a 4.5% local tax, and a 0.375% Metropolitan Commuter Transportation District surcharge. In total, this adds up to 8.875%. But instead, if you didn't live in New York City and you lived in Buffalo, which is a city that's also based in the state of New York, you would have to be paying 8.75% as your sales tax rate. This of course includes the 4% state tax and a 4.75% local tax. The city of Buffalo does not have any special tax, so your sales tax rate if you were to sell goods and services in Buffalo would be 8.75%. And so even though Buffalo and New York City are both based in the state of New York, you would have different sales tax rates for each city. And something else to keep in mind is that some states in the USA are called origin states. This means that you pay the sales tax rate of where you are physically located in that state. This of course means that the sales tax rate that you are going to pay will not change, and it will always be the same for all sales made within that state. This makes it very easy to keep track of. But some states in the USA are destination based, and they make you pay the sales tax rate of wherever the customer is located. New York is one of these states, and as I'm sure you can imagine, if you are obligated to collect sales tax in a destination based state, this means that the rate that you are going to pay is going to change constantly. Luckily, there are automated tools that you can utilize to make this easy for you, and again, I will be explaining them later in the video. Question number 2. When do I have to pay sales tax, and who pays it? Is it me, the dropshipper, or is it both of us? The answer to this depends on whether you or the dropshipper have what is called Nexus in a state. Nexus is a legal term, which specifies that you have a physical presence in a state big enough to warrant having to collect and pay sales tax within it. And there are some obvious ways that you can have Nexus in a state. For example, if you live in a state, then you have Nexus in it. And if you have an office or a warehouse in a state, then you have Nexus in it. Those are some obvious ways, but there are some not so obvious ways, and the rule's definition will change from state to state. For example, in some states, having a remote employee living there will cause you to have Nexus in that state. If you have Nexus in your customer's state, then you are required to collect and pay sales tax and comply with the sales tax laws of that state. So the very first thing that you need to do when answering this question is to figure out which states that you have Nexus in, and the easiest way to do that is to simply talk to an accountant. Once you've figured that out, there are 5 scenarios that you might be in. Situation 1. Your customer is based in Oregon, New Hampshire, Montana, or Delaware. If that's the case, then congratulations, because these states don't have any sales tax. That means that neither you nor the dropshipper needs to collect it. Situation number 2. Neither you nor your dropshipper has Nexus in your customer's state. If that's the case, then congratulations again, because neither you nor your dropshipper are required to collect and pay sales tax. Situation number 3. Your dropshipper has Nexus in your customer's state, but you do not. Generally, the state is going to require that the dropshipper collect the sales tax and not you. How it is calculated, though, varies state to state. Some states are going to ask for the sales tax on the total amount of the transaction between you and the dropshipper, but some states are more complicated, and they're going to require that the dropshipper collect sales tax on the transaction between you and your customer. And California is its own special snowflake and has its own bizarre rule. If the dropshipper doesn't know what the transaction price is between you and your customer, then the dropshipper is required to collect sales tax on the amount of the transaction between you and them plus 10%. But here is the nifty thing. With the right documentation, the dropshipper is able to have that sales tax waived, so neither you nor the dropshipper need to pay it. I'll explain how later in this video. Situation number 4. You have Nexus in your customer's state, but the dropshipper does not. In this case, it's pretty simple. You need to collect the sales tax on the transaction and pay it. Your dropshipper does not. In situation number 5, both you and your dropshipper have Nexus in your customer's state. You need to provide your dropshipper with a resale certificate. A resale certificate certifies that you are an official reseller and you are purchasing the products for them specifically for resale. Because of this, the sales tax is waived on the transaction between you and the dropshipper. That means then that when you buy the item from the dropshipper for the purposes of resale, you won't have to pay any sales tax. The resale certificate, or the equivalency, is also what you provide in situation 3. It allows the dropshipper to waive the sales tax on the order because you are purchasing the items for resale. But of course, in situation 3, you weren't required to pay the sales tax because you weren't located in your customer's state. But in this situation here, you are still required to collect and pay the sales tax from the customer. The basic gist of it is that as a dropshipper, you need to figure out which states that you have Nexus in, and then you only need to worry about collecting and paying that sales tax in the states that you have Nexus in. But if you don't have Nexus in a state, then you don't need to collect the sales tax. You may need to get a resale certificate so that your dropshipper can waive the sales tax on the transaction between you and them, but you are not required to collect sales tax and pay it from the transaction between you and the customer. And if this is sounding scary, you really shouldn't. The chances are that most of you have at most Nexus in a few states, so you really shouldn't fret about it. But figuring out whether or not you have Nexus can be a bit tricky, so I've got another question that you really should ask a qualified accountant. Question number 3. While you may think that you don't have Nexus in your customer's state, are you really sure about that? The reason why I ask this is because there are some states where simply having a dropshipper located in that state is going to cause you to have Nexus in it. For example, some states say that if your dropshipper is packaging and fulfilling orders in your customer's state, then you have Nexus there. And you might be wondering why that is. Well, the logic is that being able to package and fulfill orders in its state is one of the advantages of being able to do business in its state. And since you are getting that advantage by proxy, the states believe that you should pay for it. And then in some states, if you have a dropshipper that is accepting returns in that state, that means then that you also have Nexus in that state. And why? Well, again, the logic is the same. They say that managing returns in a state is one of the advantages of doing business in a state, and since you by proxy have that advantage, you should pay for it. For better or for worse, sales tax is a huge revenue stream for states, and they will take any excuse to collect it. Right now in the USA, there are not a lot of federal guidelines surrounding the issue of what constitutes as nexus. This leaves it greatly up to the interpretation of each individual state. Each state has its own rules, and the list can be really long. The best way to figure out if your relationship with a dropshipper constitutes nexus in a state is to seek the advice of a qualified accountant. But what I hope you don't do is use this as an excuse to put you off the business of dropshipping. Because the reality is that sales tax is going to be something that you're going to have to deal with no matter what business you're in. So don't decide to not pursue dropshipping just because it sounds like a challenge. Embrace it as a necessary part of gaining financial freedom. So now we move on to the next question. And in this case here, let's say that you have analysed your relationship with the dropshipper and you've determined that that does not constitute having nexus in a state, but your dropshipper has nexus in a state. What now? Question number 4. In this case here, how do I get sales tax waived for both me and my dropshipper? Because you don't have sales tax nexus in your customer's state, but your dropshipper does, you're going to need to qualify for sales tax exemption. You see, sales tax is a very special type of tax. It's only supposed to be charged to the final customer, not to the retailer. As a dropshipper, you are not the final customer. You are a middleman between the wholesaler or the manufacturer and the final customer. You are not keeping the item. You are reselling it. And items that are purchased for the purpose of resale are exempt from sales tax if you can prove it. Basically, you need to prove that you are a retailer so that the sales tax can be waived. To show and prove that you are a retailer and not a customer, you need to get a resale certificate for that state and give it to the company that you are going to be dropshipping from, because they're going to need to have this resale certificate to prove to governing bodies in the future that the transaction between you and them was for the purposes of resale. Question number 5. How do I get a resale certificate or license? Every state has their own form of getting a resale certificate or license, and it's usually not very hard. You just need to fill out a form, which can often be done online. For most people, the difficulty is in figuring out how and where to find this. Luckily, Sale Who have compiled an interactive map of the USA, which will direct you to the correct place to register for your resale certificate. To access it, click on the link in the video description below. Now here is something to keep in mind. There are 9 states that will only accept a resale certificate or license from that state to prove that you are a retailer. They will accept nothing else. If you are doing business with a company that is dropshipping within one of these 9 states, then you need to get a resale certificate or license from that individual state. But luckily, there are other states out there that don't require a resale certificate or license. They will accept other documents. For example, the states Alabama, Arizona, and Colorado will accept a resale certificate from your home state. This means then that you don't have to go to the effort and bother of getting a resale certificate from their state as long as you have one from your own personal home state already. Now, if you're based out of the USA, then don't worry. You don't have to be a USA resident to apply for a resale certificate. And even if you live outside the USA, these same rules apply to you. If your dropshipper has nexus in your customer's state, then you need to get a resale certificate so that they can waiver the sales tax on the transaction between you and them. Question number 6. What if I'm dropshipping from a supplier that is located internationally, such as China? If you are dropshipping using suppliers that are located in China, like most AliExpress dropshippers are, then you don't have to worry about your dropshipper having nexus in your customer's state. Then the only thing that you need to worry about is whether you have nexus in your customer's state. If you do, then you need to collect and pay sales tax. If you don't have nexus, then you don't need to. Question number 7. I have nexus in my customer's state and all of this sounds really scary. How do I easily collect sales tax? Well, I'm going to answer this question in 3 parts. I'm first of all going to explain how to collect sales tax easily using WooCommerce, then Amazon.com, and finally Shopify. To collect sales tax with WooCommerce, I strongly recommend that you get a subscription to a tool called TaxJar. Simply click on the link in the video description below and you can get a free 30-day trial for it. TaxJar is an automated sales tax reporting and filing tool. It streamlines collecting and paying sales tax and is a necessary tool for any serious dropshipper. It's super simple. Just sign up for your free trial of TaxJar and then in your account settings, input the states that you have Nexus in. Then you can download the free TaxJar WooCommerce plugin to link to your TaxJar account with your WooCommerce store. It will then automatically add the correct sales tax settings to each of your transactions. Now your store will be set up to automatically collect the right amount of sales tax from each customer. And that's it, you're done. The easiest way to collect sales tax on Amazon.com is to use the Amazon Tax Service. And before you can use it, you need to do two things. One, you are going to need to have a Pro Merchant account. This is a feature that is only available for Pro Merchant accounts. Luckily, you can get a free 30-day trial to this if you're just starting out. And two, you are going to have already signed up for a resale certificate or license for each of the states that you have Nexus in. From here, you need to do the following. Step 1, log into your seller account. Step 2, click on your settings and select Tax Settings. Step 3, click View Edit your tax collection and shipping and handling. Step 4, choose how to manage your product tax codes. Product tax codes, otherwise known as PTCs, are codes that Amazon lets you manually apply and assign to each individual item, which will classify it into a specific tax category. Amazon has an option called Use Default Product Tax Code. For most people, this is going to be absolutely fine and you can just select this. And step 5, specify your tax collection obligations. Here is where you tell Amazon which states, cities, and districts you are required to collect tax from. Tick all the boxes that are applicable. You also need to specify whether you'll be collecting sales tax on shipping and gift wrapping. Now obviously, this can be a bit confusing and scary. Luckily, TaxJar have created a free cheat sheet, which tells you which boxes to tick depending on which states that you have Nexus in. And again, you can find a link on how to get to TaxJar in the video description below, which is where you can find your free cheat sheet. After you've ticked the right boxes, just save your changes and you're done. Amazon will charge you a 2.9% fee on all of the tax that they collect. So if they collect $10 in taxes, they're going to charge you 29 cents, but this is well worth it. And finally, to collect sales tax with Shopify, simply go to your dashboard and click on Tax. This is going to open up your tax settings. Under Physical Presence, simply type in the state that you have Nexus in. If you have a physical address tied to your Nexus, type the zip code in for it as well and save that entry. Do this for each state. Shopify will now automatically add sales tax to each purchase in the states that you have Nexus in. And question number 8, how do I pay the sales tax? So now you've collected the sales tax for each of the orders, but this isn't all that you need to do. You now need to actually pay it back individually to each of the states. These returns can be done online, and they are usually done quarterly. But remember, you need to specify how much tax is going to each individual district and city, because in addition to the flat sales tax rate for the state, each individual city and district can have their own special tax. Obviously, this can be a bit of a nightmare to deal with, having to figure out each individual amount owed to the different districts and cities, which is why I strongly recommend that you use TaxJar. TaxJar automatically syncs up to your WooCommerce account or your Shopify account or your Amazon account, and it works out for you how much sales tax that you owe. It will automatically create the reports for you, outlining how much tax is owed to each state, district, and city, making it super simple when it comes time to do your tax returns. One of the best features of it is Autofile, which will automatically file and pay your sales tax returns for you in 37 states. When you take into account that 4 states don't have sales tax, with TaxJar you'll only ever have to manually file sales tax returns in 9 states. I strongly recommend that any serious e-commerce seller out there get a subscription to TaxJar because it's going to simplify your tax returns massively. You will also quickly make back the money that you spend from the money that you're saving from your accountant fees. And remember, you can get a free 30-day trial to it in the video description below. Please be aware that is an affiliate link, but I'm only recommending TaxJar because I do strongly believe in it and know that it can help you simplify your tax returns. Now, before I close this video, I'd like to give you some tentative closing advice. If you are concerned with whether or not that you have Nexus in a state or not, and you don't have the money to go and talk to an accountant, then the safest thing that you can do is just collect sales tax in it. The sales tax amount is really small, and it's probably not going to sway your customer away from purchasing the item from you. If you charge, collect and pay sales tax, then you are 100% safe no matter what. If you want to risk it, that is entirely up to you. The reality is that if you are a new seller or a small-time seller, the chances of states chasing you up for anything more than a few $100s is very, very tiny. I also recommend that if you want to be in this business for the long term, that you slowly work your way up to having the right resale certificate or documents for every single state in the USA. Because even though you may not have a dropshipper located in California right now, in the future you may find one there and you'll want to start doing business with them ASAP. Working with them will be a lot smoother and easier if you've already applied and gotten a resale certificate in the state of California. Of course, this is a process that is going to be going on in the long term because it's going to take some time. The very first step that you should take is you should apply for a resale certificate in your home state, since there are lots of other states out there that will accept it as evidence. And if you live outside the USA, then apply for the equivalency of where you live. This is not the be-all and end-all, but it is a good start.